Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining the webinar, Living Your Best Life Now, Mental Health for Older Adults. My name is Abby Culbertson, and I serve as Director of Marketing and Communications at Insight Counseling Centers. For those of you who don't know us, Insight Counseling Centers exist to restore lives to wholeness mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. We do this by providing psychotherapy to individuals, couples, and families. We see clients in person in offices across Middle Tennessee and across the entire state of Tennessee through telehealth. We're a nonprofit organization, and we accept donations in order to provide an income-based fee scale to our clients, which makes therapy more affordable for more people. We also train future therapists through clinical internships and supervision. And we offer mental health awareness training to the community through events like this one. Funding for this event is provided by the SeniorTrust Digital Literacy Grant, administered by the West End Home Foundation, and we're grateful to them for their support. Now, without further ado, I would like to introduce our moderator. Mercedes Lytle, a transplant from Mound Bayou, Mississippi, began her career in Nashville with Inroads Nashville, Inc., a nonprofit international career development organization. She is a proud alumna of Fisk University, earning a Bachelor of Science degree, and Stanford University, earning a Master of Arts in Teaching. Mercedes spent 27 years working with talented minority youth in corporations at Inroads before becoming Assistant Commissioner Human Resources for the state of Tennessee. Her passion for helping improve lives compelled her to volunteer over the decades with a variety of Nashville community service organizations, including the YWCA, United Way, Hope Station, 50 Forward, and Insight Counseling Centers, where she currently serves as board chair. Good morning, Mercedes.
Good morning, Abby, and thank you for that introduction. I too want to just take a minute and welcome everybody to this Insight-sponsored event that focuses on mental health for older adults. We're going to spend some time this morning with a panel of mental health professionals who will answer questions and provide potentially life-changing information. Panelists, thank you for being here today and for sharing with us. I'd like to start by asking our panelists to introduce themselves, to let us know who you are. We will start with Amanda, and then we will have Josh introduce himself. Amanda.
Sure thing. Good morning, everyone. My name is Amanda Gibson, and I'm happy to be here today as a licensed professional counselor. I hold a master's degree in clinical mental health counseling from the Chicago School of Professional Psychology. I have been with Insight since 2019, first starting off with my internship and then transitioning over as a contract therapist. Throughout my career, I have dedicated myself to supporting clients who face various mental health challenges. I specialize in working with individuals dealing with depression, anxiety, complex trauma, eating disorders, and body image issues, as well as gender and sexuality issues. And I exclusively provide counseling services through telehealth right now.
Thank you, Amanda. We appreciate that information and introduction. Josh, to you.
Thank you, Mercedes. My name is Joshua Medeiros. I'm a licensed professional counselor, mental health service provider, temporary license here in Tennessee. I received my graduate education from Divine Mercy University at Sterling, Virginia. I currently work out of Insight's Clarksville branch office at the First Christian Church, and I do in-person work in Ashland City, actually, with a geriatric emotional support group. I'm a clinical certified traumatologist, through the Green Cross Academy of Traumatology, and so specialize in trauma and stress-related disorders. But I also work with couples and family, children, and kind of have a niche in several different areas. So haven't been able to pigeonhole myself somewhere yet, but we're working on it. I'm excited to be here and to work with you all, answering some questions. So thank you, Mercedes.
Quite all right. And thank you for being here and joining us this morning. Just to let everyone know, we hope that we will also have one additional panelist if we can get her into this party this morning. So with this, we'd like to go ahead and get started, but I want to remind you that if you, those of you who are attending this webinar, have a question you'd like to ask, comments you'd like to make, please put them in the chat. Send those in to us. And if you have a particular question directed for a specific panelist, please include that in your chat information as well. We want to hear from you and hopefully be able to answer any questions you may have. With all of that, we are now going to get started, and we're going to get started with a question for Amanda. Amanda, what are some of the unique life stage issues that we as older adults encounter late in life?
Yeah, so later in life, individuals may face a variety of unique life stages with their issues, and they can vary based on factors such as health, relationships, and personal circumstances. So here are some common life stage issues that people may encounter in later years. First and foremost, one of the most obvious ones is health challenges. Aging often brings out health issues such as chronic illnesses, physical disabilities, and cognitive decline. Managing these conditions and maintaining a good quality of life can become a significant concern and major stressor. Another is loss and grief. As people age, they may experience the loss of loved ones, including spouses, siblings, friends, and peers. Coping with grief and adjusting to life after such losses can be pretty challenging. Another struggle that can come up is planning for retirement and financial planning. Retirement is a significant transition that requires careful financial planning. So people may need to navigate issues related to pensions, Social Security benefits, healthcare costs, and estate planning. Another common one is social isolation and loneliness. Many older adults face social isolation and loneliness, which can have detrimental effects on mental and physical well-being. Maintaining social connections and finding meaningful activities become very important. Another example is changes in roles and identities that show up. Retirement or other life changes may lead to shifts in personal identity and an overall sense of purpose in one's life. Individuals may need to redefine themselves. They may need to find new interests or even figure out how to contribute in their society in different ways. Another struggle that may present itself is the act of caregiving and the experience of being dependent on others. Older adults may become caregivers themselves or rely on others for support and care. So balancing caregiving responsibilities, maintaining one's own independence, or even just adjusting to receiving care can feel really complicated and emotionally challenging. Another challenge that may present is housing and living arrangements. Decisions regarding housing and living arrangements often arise later in life. And this can look like having to downsize your home or considering assisted living, nursing homes. or making modifications to the current home that you live in for increased accessibility. End of life planning is another major stressor. Considering end of life wishes, such as medical care and funeral arrangements, is an important aspect. So involving these discussions with family, friends, and healthcare providers is really encouraged. And then last but not least, existential reflection and just overall legacy of one's life. As individuals approach later stages of their life, they may reflect on their life's meaning and the legacy that they're leaving behind. And this can look like contemplating one's accomplishments, imparting wisdom, or leaving a positive impact on future generations. The one thing that I do want to note is that not all individuals will experience these issues, and it's very specific, just based by person to person. And I just offer that support from family, friends, and healthcare professionals and community resources can play a huge role in navigating these issues. Oh, you're muted, Mercedes. There you go.
I'm sorry, I am not on my game this morning, but
You're quite all right.
that list was pretty thorough and attention getting in terms of an older adult and the changes that do occur. I appreciate the comment that you made about how we should rely on those around us and the resources that are available to help us deal with those issues that do apply to us. Hopefully, Josh, you can help us with a follow-up question that's related to that, and that is, how can seeing a mental health professional improve our quality of life as an older adult as we deal with these possible issues that occur?
Thank you. I think one of the biggest aids that a mental health professional can provide in terms of working through some of the issues that are specific to later life, transition issues, decline in health and autonomy, changes in family relationship, is offering a perspective. Offering perspective in relationship with someone who has a more objective view of the situation. A lot of times, let's take, for example, physical health. As humans age, we actually increase our ability to tolerate physical discomfort. And so as that increases, it can make it more difficult to realize when something is really a concern that should receive medical attention. In the same way, relationship issues, say with a spouse or peer or family member that maybe we've dealt with for a long time, relationship dynamics that are unsatisfactory or maybe have caused a rift that's grown, we have this baseline perspective that this is just the way that it is. There's not a hope for it to be better. Being in relationship with a professional and gaining a perspective on that and how it could change can open up a whole new world of possibilities, even in old age, for improved flourishing across many levels of human development, whether that be physical, emotional, relational, or spiritual. And so I think just that perspective that a professional can offer is one of the main agents for how that change can occur.
Terrific. Thank you, Josh. I appreciate that, that insight that you bring to us. I know that some of us that are on the call today are on because we care about helping someone else in their lives who may be struggling. Amanda, what are some of the ways that we can destigmatize talking about mental health and seeking mental health care?
Yeah, so I believe the very first step is having exact conversations to the very one that we're having right now, while sharing education and awareness, right? So we want to raise awareness about the mental health challenges that can arise later in life. And we want to educate older adults, their families, and the community about the importance of mental well-being in the aging process. So let us normalize these conversations about mental health within the aging community. We want to encourage open discussions with social groups, senior centers, and retirement communities. Also creating a safe space where individuals feel comfortable sharing their experiences and emotions without fear of judgment or stigma. And by fostering an open dialogue, we can break down those barriers and encourage others to seek help. Also, sharing personal stories are very powerful tools in destigmatizing mental health. So let us encourage older adults who have sought mental health support to share their experiences openly. Their stories can provide relatability and inspire others to seek help. And we can also highlight successful journeys of older adults who have benefited from mental health services, and emphasize the positive outcomes and improvements that one can find. I also find it really important to collaborate with healthcare professionals. So working closely with geriatricians, primary care physicians, and mental health specialists who specialize in the needs of older adults. I would like to promote mental health screenings and assessments during routine checkups, encouraging healthcare providers to initiate conversations about mental health and their emotional well-being, just to make it a standard part of care for the older population. And with all of that to say, our mental health is just as equally as important as our physical health.
Sure.
So I like to say, just because we can't see what's going on in our minds doesn't mean that it doesn't still hold value, or that it's not there. So in every stage of our lives, I believe we all deserve aspects of healing physically, emotionally, and spiritually.
Terrific. Amanda, if I am a person who has been in a community where mental health is stigmatized, you do provide some options for us. But if that's been really hard for me, is there any particular first step of the multitude that you presented? Is there any one step that you think would be the safest or the most successful for me as a total newcomer to the whole concept of mental health services?
For sure, yeah. So I like to show curiosity towards that resistance or hesitancy, right? So just kind of getting curious of, well, what's holding you back, or what are your reservations or concerns about seeking health, or kind of opening up and being vulnerable about some of these struggles, and just kind of having an open dialogue and exploring that first. Maybe like, what are the reservations, and talking about that first.
Okay. Thank you. That is a great place to begin, and I appreciate that candor. Josh, as we kind of look back over our past as older adults or seniors, sometimes we may regret some things that we have done or said in the past. What can we do with and about our feelings of regret?
You know, that's a really good question. As we transition from middle adulthood into old age, we move, and this is one of the transitions that Amanda had alluded to earlier, from this sense of generativity, wanting to provide for the next generation and establish that legacy, to looking back and seeing that our lives were lived with an integrity, that the values that we hold really did dictate the way that we lived. And so often, when we look back over our own histories, we tend to focus on those few instances that were the exception, those few instances where we didn't live up to the values that we proposed, that we wanted to teach, that we wanted to pass on. And by ruminating on those, can really despair about the quality of our life and the legacy that we're going to leave. And so in working with mental health professionals can be a way to reevaluate the weight of those particular instances and memories, and allow us to put them into, like I said before, perspective playing such a huge role in mental health in aging, is put into perspective an entire life, and understanding that while those were maybe painful experiences or memories or legitimate and objective shortcomings, that they are not what define you as a human being in the eyes of anyone else, whether it be family, friends, peers, children, whatever it may be. And so it can allow the older clients to regain this sense of integrity that is strong enough to withstand the physical disintegration that occurs in old age, that they've lived a life that they can be proud of, that they're happy with. And as we age, family becomes more and more important. And so a lot of times those memories have to do with specific family members or interactions and relationships. And so strengthening and building those relationships. I'll say that there's several older clients that I have that come to me not because of something that they were self-aware of emotionally or mental health wise, but it's because there's a specific issue with someone else that they wanted to talk about. And in doing so, we end up landing precisely on that desire for integrity in old age, and looking back and being able to say that they lived the values that they proposed and espoused throughout their life.
Wow. It sounds that sense of integrity and really our perspective are very important values and considerations as we advance in age, and as we look back on our lives and not feel so much with the regret, but looking at the entire picture. So thank you for pushing us to expand our thought processes and not focus so much on the bases that we missed, but on more of the whole game that we played. So I appreciate that. Amanda, how, I know this is a big issue as we get older, and we've already talked about your health, your physical health as a part of the whole. Can you talk to us a little bit about how our mental health, I'm trying to make sure I'm saying this, how our mental health is related to our physical health?
Yeah, so this is kind of one of my favorite topics because it really is a full mind, body, spiritual experience. And our mental health and physical health are so deeply connected. and affect each other in so many ways. And so when we talk about our mental health, we're referring to the emotional and the psychological and social well-being. And then our physical health is relating to the conditions of our bodies and our overall physical well-being, right? So while they may appear very distinct, they have quite a huge influence on each other. So first and foremost, our mental health can impact our physical health in ways through experiencing psychological stress, anxiety, and depression. And that can lead to physical symptoms such as headaches, muscle tension, and sleep issues, right? So prolonged stress can then weaken our immune system and then making us more susceptible to illnesses and diseases. Additionally, mental health conditions can interfere with our ability to adopt healthy lifestyle behaviors, such as exercising regularly, eating well, and getting enough sleep. And then on the flip side, our physical health can also impact our mental well-being. So when we're physically unwell, like we're sick, diagnosed with cancer, or we're just in physical pain, that in turn can affect our mood, leading to feelings of frustration, irritability, and sadness. For example, even chronic physical conditions like diabetes or cardiovascular diseases can increase the risk of developing mental health disorders like depression and anxiety. When one experiences physical limitations or disabilities, that can also impact one's self-esteem and their overall sense of well-being. So for both our mental and physical health, they are influenced by so many common factors, such as our lifestyle choices and our social support. So I like to encourage engaging in regular physical activity because this has been shown to have positive effects on our mental health and reducing symptoms like depression and anxiety and stress. I also encourage eating a balanced diet rich in nutrients that provide the brain with the necessary fuel for mental function. Additionally, having a strong support network and healthy relationships can contribute to better mental health and physical well-being. Like I said earlier, think it's really important to see this relationship between mental and physical health and take a holistic approach to this care. If we prioritize our mental health and seeking support when needed, then we can improve our ability to pay attention to our physical health. And likewise, taking care of our bodies through what I've suggested earlier can also impact our mental health too, right? So nurturing both of these domains, I believe is really important for maintaining a balanced and healthy life. And by addressing mental and physical health together, we can then enhance our overall well-being and improve resilience even, and lead to more fulfilling lives.
Thank you. Amanda, I heard both sides of things that we could do, both physical and mental. I can't help as a senior, I can't help but realize that there are things that I plan to do physically every year. It's on my to-do list. I don't miss it. Are there activities or is there something that I should be doing or any older adult should be doing on the mental side that's pretty much equates to getting your annual physical or your whatever it is that you do that we do on a physical side? What can we or should we or consider doing on the mental side on a regular basis?
That's an excellent question, because yeah, there's physical activity, right? Like physical exercise. And
Yes.
then there's mental activity, like mental exercise.
Mhm.
So I really encourage engaging activities that you obviously find enjoyable, and that could be reading, engaging in games, whether that's solo or with others. So I find that, card games is really great to keep the mental activity going. Sudoku, puzzles, anything that really kind of engages both the mind and the hands to inspire thought planning, creativity, to inspire, different thoughts. Yeah, so reading, maybe learning something new, like I said, games. Um, yeah, those are my suggestions in that. And just, yeah.
I appreciate the focus on the balance on both the physical and the mental, and our conscious commitment to doing something on both sides that will help us again be more holistically healthy. So thank you for that.
Mercedes, I would actually, if I could,
Good,
I would add
Josh.
to that the suggestions that Amanda provided are excellent for like maintaining cognitive health. When it comes to something like emotional health, when we talk about mental health, that's a lot of times what we're looking at is maintaining and pouring into social relationships. Family and friends and social engagement are crucial in the well-being of a healthy emotional life. We grow in relationship in that way, and so it's really important to maintain those connections in whatever means possible. And that does become difficult in old age because, as we talked about, grief and loss is something that can really hinder our ability or the availability of socializing as an older adult. And so allowing ourselves to engage in activities where we're maybe open to some new experiences with friends, maybe it's a senior center or some sort of activity group, is an excellent way to grow the social networks that will allow us to continue to be in contact with others. Isolation is the enemy when it comes to emotional mental health.
Thank you for adding that. I agree that the social aspect is so critical for us, and I think as we age, it gets to be more so. As you underscored, it becomes more of an important function and part of our lives than when we were young or younger. So thanks, Josh, for adding those. I'm going to push this open discussion a little bit by not asking a specific professional to respond to the question. Once we get to be older, what do our children, we're talking about this social aspect, what do our children and our grandchildren need from us that may be different from before? As an older adult, what do we need to be sensitive to in that regard, in terms of what children and grandchildren might need at this point in our lives? Either of you want to jump in to give some thought to that question?
I'd say, so to piggyback off my previous comment, is engagement, especially as older adults looking back and wanting to maintain that they've lived a life of integrity. If family is something that is important to you, then engage with your family. I'll give maybe a specific example for those who are spiritual or religious, older men, grandfathers, those who engage with their grandsons, the grandson's likelihood of maintaining and engaging with their own religious practices or spirituality is significantly higher for those that have positive relationships with their grandfathers, even over the influence of their own fathers. And so having, if that is something that you want to pass on in your family, if that is important to you, then engage in that way with your grandchildren. Because grandparents are, though maybe not as culturally prevalent as it has been in the past, is still extremely important for passing on the values and ideas and wisdom that comes with old age.
Thank you. I appreciate your pushing us a little bit in more into the social aspects of our mental health. When we think about that, what are, and Amanda, I'm going to put you on Front Street here. How can we, what things can we do to help bridge this generational gap that is essential for our mental health? What are some of the things that we might want to consider? Because we do have multi-generations functioning together these days. What are some of your thoughts?
Yeah, so my very first thought in that, and it's similar to Josh's response, in encouraging and being open to dialogue. And with that, remembering to identify shared values through these conversations, so that once we identify those shared values, we can see how much we have in common and connect in that, and be able to celebrate diversity too, right? To be able to celebrate change and growth through generations, and exploring new ways of perspectives, right? And just being able to hold space for both, that we have these things in common and there are things that are different between us. So I think it's really important to be able to share and hold space for both, of this is our common value and this is what is a little bit different in our lifestyle. So
and that little different is a healthy thing. It is a healthy thing. Yeah,
exactly.
One last thing that will help us, I think through even more of this social aspect. We've talked about family and particularly our children and our grandchildren, but what does our community need from us at this particular point in our lives as senior adults? What is it that we can present to our communities, and what do they look for from us? And I'll throw that out to either of you guys to give a response to.
I think communities really suffer when the depth of experience and wisdom that's accumulated over a lifetime is not shared, especially in the domains where it would be helpful. And so we have older adults who are or have been community leaders and either fail to or don't avail themselves of the social supports that are available to make their voices heard in those arenas where that wisdom and experience could be so helpful. It can be the perspective a lot of times, because the main modes of communication that exist today are geared towards younger people, that those ideas aren't appreciated, right? Social media being one of them, that many older adults aren't involved in social media. And so the ideas that are echoed there oftentimes don't accurately represent those of older adults. But it does not mean that the in-person interaction and the one-on-one relational handing down of that wisdom and knowledge won't make itself known and influence the thoughts and ideas of younger generations, and it should.
Yes, certainly. Go ahead. I didn't mean to stop you. I was just agreeing with you, Josh.
No, I'll put a full stop on that point for now and see if anyone else has more. And I definitely want to leave some space open for some of our audience questions as well.
Thank you. Thank you. And we do have a few audience questions, and we certainly want to provide some attention to them. So let's start with one of our questions that's out there. This question is, can you share thoughts about the older adult who is grieving and is being told by others what they should do during this season?
I would just like to say that grief is a very personal experience, and there's no right or wrong way to experience grief. And so when someone tells you that you should be doing this, to take that with a grain of salt and reflect that back on yourself and ask, what is it that I need right now to work through this grief, to work through this loss? How can I show space for my sadness and normalize what I've lost and speak for that, right? So kind of around boundaries, really just asking yourself what your needs are and what it is that you need in order to work through that grief.
So it sounds like a personal attention is a primary, should be a primary focus during this time.
Yeah, I personally don't like the word should, because there's an obligatory kind of demand on that. And like I said, grief is a very personal and vulnerable experience. And so we shouldn't be doing anything in particular. It's how we grieve and find support through that grieving process.
Certainly. Thank you, Amanda.
I hear a much more, especially in this season of life, as we talk about older adults, practical application to that question. That yes, grief is a very personal experience for the one who's going through it. But let's say, especially with an older population, if it's the loss of a spouse and there are children who have this concern that mom or dad aren't going to be able to maintain the house that they've lived in together for however many years. And maybe these shoulds they're coming from a place of concern. And so it can be helpful to hear this, what feels like a push in a direction that you aren't necessarily willing or ready to move, as just that. It is a concern. It's a vocalization of the love and care that other people in your family have for you, but that doesn't mean that you have to act on it. That doesn't mean that it has to be received through this feeling that it is something that you needed to do. And I think that's where taking that space to let the initial waves of emotion subside before acting, and so that you can act from a place of reason, from a place of confidence in the next step, and not out of a place of reaction to the loss or to the demands that are being placed by others. And this is actually a perfect example of when working with a professional who can offer that perspective would be extremely helpful.
Great. Thanks, Josh. We also have a question that says, are you seeing any different issues with older adults as we come out of COVID? How can we support those people? Is that something either of you have, that you would have some experiences or that might be applicable in this situation?
I don't have a lot of experience with post-COVID clients in the older adult population, but what I have learned through similar experiences surviving a COVID diagnosis is I've heard the term long-term COVID, and kind of having long-term effects struggles with breathing, like respiratory issues, and other challenges once trying to heal from the COVID diagnosis. So that's really all that I can speak for, is if one has pre-existing conditions, especially with respiratory issues. I've learned that that is a long-term struggle that someone faces post-COVID.
Yeah, I would add to that and say it definitely depends on the living situation. During the pandemic, a lot of folks lost a lot of friends. So those in like senior living communities, because the population was more susceptible. There's definitely a lot more grief and loss in the last several years as a result. I think another one of the big changes was the inability to do exactly what we said, which was socialize for positive mental health outcomes. That if isolation is the enemy, then COVID ended up being its greatest ally. And so finding ways to re-engage personally with older adults, especially those who feel like they've kind of been left behind in the technology shift that happened over the last several years in moving to platforms like this, right? Like a webinar. This is not something that many older adults would necessarily be involved in. I think a lot of participants here are looking for answers of how do we help those who maybe don't avail themselves of this technology as easily. And that would be the way, to find ways to engage with them personally.
Terrific. Thanks, both of you. Let's try at least one other question. For families who have child-parent dynamics disrupted from outside relationships such as marriages, are there coping methods when relationships are severed for elder adults?
I think this is a very personal question for a lot of people, because it speaks directly into that reflecting on one's life and looking for integrity. And if family becomes probably one of the top priorities overall in middle age, and continues to be until late adulthood. And so to have relationships in the family, especially parent-child relationships, severed because of outside relationships like a marriage. And my imagination immediately goes to a child who marries, and because of conflict that exists between the in-laws, they lose the relationship with the child. It can be very hard to look at the history of that relationship and maintain that sense of integrity, that those values of family being of utmost importance were passed on, because there's been a lost relationship with family. And so to speak directly into something that's so personal for someone is really difficult. And again, this is one of those instances where I would say that working with a professional to flush out that story, to share that story, to share the history of that relationship and some of the particulars of those dynamics, and then look for the perspective for understanding what of this is salvageable or fixable, what of this has to be accepted. And not only that, but understanding that relationship, just because it doesn't exist in the way that it used to, doesn't mean that what wasn't important to the development of the child or the parent. And so again, this is one of those situations where, as an individual, working with someone about gaining that perspective, about examining that relationship and that life, can be of utmost importance and help. I think can be, especially in developing the coping mechanisms that work. Right? We have a lot of, as professionals, we have a lot of things that we can throw out for dealing with stress and anxiety, how to calm down, how to pick yourself up if you're feeling low. But when it comes to relationship, it's not quite that simple. And so in complex issues like that, it's really important to be able to seek someone who can work with you directly.
Thank you, Josh. I think it's very appropriate that we end with something that leads us to balancing the physical and the mental aspects, and that there's a lot as we try to live our lives of integrity, and as we try to get a perspective, that we find ourselves opening to the idea of getting mental health assistance in the same way we get physical and spiritual help. So I think that is a very appropriate way to end our discussion today. I personally thank you guys for letting me invade your mental and professional spaces, and for sharing so openly our questions on how do we live our best life as older adults today. Thank you for letting me be a part of this, Abby, and I look forward to the next time we do something similar.